staves are the upright pieces. And takes, depending on the size of bucket or tub, you know, but average bucket takes about 20, depending on the width that they are, which varies, but you got to start out and have about 23 on hand or so. So look at that. On the side, I may have enough for two. I don't know. Stay. Go ahead and trim. I'm going to trim that off right there. We're going to take a little bit of that out of there. Nice.
Do you have any preference over the fat wood or the heartwood? I notice you're kind of getting down into the heartwood.
I prefer heart, but on cedar it will work either way. The bucket has to be kept wet. Any bucket has to be kept wet in order to be functional. Now once I've split it down to this, I'm going to go to the shaving bench and the draw knife and essentially work a piece like this to this stage right here, maybe a little wider. And that to this with a draw knife. And then work. Work my thickness from the other side. Get this side nice and flat and straight. This particular piece would be great for the bottom piece, but I'm not making a bottom like I'm making staves. So we're going to eliminate that white wood. The larger the tree, the easier these are, because when you split a large tree, a large block, these can be almost split just like that, if the tree is good enough. Very little work on it. But if the tree is smaller, and then you get more of an angle on your bolt, and thusly it requires a little bit more work. Let's just say, well, actually I'm there. Now we go to the jointer. I have to put a slight taper on that, and I have made my pattern here. Made my first stave and marked the pattern. All other staves have to have the same percentage of taper. They're not going to be the same width, but they have to have the same percentage of taper. So I make that one, I lay it there. These lines are parallel. These lines are parallel to this one. So I lay that one right there. And go to the jointer. So we're going to do that right here, right now. The jointer.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got Donna Briscoe, and she's the traveling tea lady, and she has a little demonstration she's going to put on.
I looked at that. Don't look too bad. So I'm going to, actually I can measure that now, I think. Let's see if that one's good. Just by simply laying this mark here, where I said, to the outside edge here and here, and closing it up. Nope, I'll put just a little bit more on that one, and I did nothing to that one. There, very little. Very little. And not too bad, because I'm going to round over, so I'm going to take a little off. Alright, now I'm going to go back and just double check my taper, see if I didn't lose anything. Looks pretty good. Pretty good. Somewhat. Now there's only two areas of this bucket that has to be round. And that's the inside, or the outside rather, and on the inside at the bottom. It has to be round. I can measure a circle, I can determine the radius of a circle, but I cannot deal with an oval. I'm just rounding out some here to save me some work. Now I'm going to round it over out here to make a circle. Just by taking wood off the edge like this. Growth rings will run perpendicular to the face.
Okay.
As you can see these growth rings, these are slightly off, but you want them straight up and down. They're as close as you can get. That makes a very, very stable wood. It doesn't warp and carry on nearly as bad as the other. Another thing too is that the wood has to compress somewhat when you put it together. It has to compress. When it goes together, it needs to compress. You need to be able to compress these woods. And it's easier to push this way than it is this way, because this way you're going against the growth line, which is the hard part. This way you're going into the softer wood and you can actually compress it. Matter of fact, for final assembly, I will take this and run it over a hard surface like this.
You're going to burnish it a little bit.
Burnish it, kind of compress it.
Okay.
And then that will swell back about there.
So explain this again.
These are tools. These iron rings are tools. Steel is valuable and rare, and I will finish this bucket and actually finish it, put it together using the iron. And when it's finished, the bottom end, everything is done. I will harvest the white oak tree, about 8 inches in diameter, and I will quarter it. Then I'll work the growth ring and work out a split about 1.5 inches wide, and roughly 3/16 of an inch thick. And I will make wooden hoops. I'll have one here. This is an arrow lock. Of course, this has been used or broke or whatever, but that's long, and I determine the length of this by physically wrapping it around the bucket, overlapping, and making a mark. The mark I make will be this point here and this point right here. That's where they come together. And then I will create the arrow and create the lock, and I will put it together.
Wet and green.
Wet and green. Of course, it's not going to be round. It's going to be kind of once I get it started over the bucket, then it will become round as the bucket is. And now this is one of those things that I can make longer, but I can't make shorter. Arrow a little bit on the other side. That way you can go back and make an adjustment.
Just by trimming the wood off of
by
here.
trimming.
That's going to let it release. Okay.
Let it release just a little bit at a
I got
time
you.
to where I get it exactly where I want it.
And that's called an arrow lock.
Arrow lock. Arrow lock. This has to be worked wet and green. Okay. Well, we're going to get some of that here. With here's a squirt. Remember I said later on I'll reach down in and drag out some wood if I don't want down in there. I'll use that. I'll explain that later. And let me get some stuff out here. Yes, the most important stuff. All right. Okay. Now we go to the bottom. Now, remember I said in the bottom I have to have a circle. I cannot measure it over. I have to have a circle. So I will actually use another hoop to lay it down there, maybe even scribe a line around it so that I can work the wood out to the line. Then I know I have a circle. Then I insert this, no bottom, mind you. Then I insert this tool. It's called a Croze, a C-R-O-Z-E. And that's how I make the groove in the bucket to put the bottom in. Without the bottom being in there, I will simply use the top, use the bottom as a guide, where I've trimmed off now. I've already trimmed it. And I'll just scratch this until I get my groove. I'll adjust this out and as I need to. Anyway, after I make that groove using the Croze to the depth that I want, then I have to determine a radius. And simply do that by this. Got the divider, and I would first guess about the depth of the crow, and the crow's right there. I'm gonna come out somewhere around the center. I'm just going to guess. All right, guess. Then I'm gonna lock it up. Then I'm gonna pick a point here. I'm gonna start right there. Right there. Now, that's the starting point. That's got to be the ending point also. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm a little long. So I just simply adjust back 1/6 of that distance as a guess. And I do it again. And again, if necessary, until I end where I began. Then thusly that becomes my radius. Okay? Equilateral triangle. And I will scribe, because I want these to go back the way that they are. In other words, if I have to use this many pieces, I will scribe 1 across like so. I know that one goes right there. And I'll go up here and I'll make 2 marks.
You're all ready? You need the mic?
2 marks, and I'll go up here and I'll make 3 marks. All right. Now, then I'll pick a place where I want my center to be. Of course, I don't want it to be there, but
Morning, folks.
and then I'll draw my circle.
I'm Major Mark
Okay.
Liddell, and
Okay. Then I will take my little bow saw.
before you is Private Marshal Geary, and we're going to do a demonstration
I will
of firing a musket.
Saw the arc.
A good soldier.
And you got a really thin blade in that, so it's almost like a coping saw. Okay.
All right. Then
What we're going to be doing is blank powder charges. There's no
I can always line them back up right here.
For safety
See
reasons.
where I made my marks.
After you cut it out,
I'm gonna take them
line the
apart.
marks
I'm gonna
up,
take them apart.
should have a circle.
And I'll put it back together. The circle's going to be there.
Right.
It's going to be there. Then I'll taper the edges.
So what you're relying on once this thing is together then is the wood swelling up from being wet to
exactly
seal the
right.
bucket. Okay.
Exactly right. But I still got to be pretty good. Wood will only swell so far. And my work has to be good.
Pull the percussion
And then
back,
swelling takes up
place it on the
the
middle.
little pieces.
So you told me that it takes a whole day to make a bucket.
At this point, he is
So during the Civil War period, during the 1860s, what would a bucket like this have sold for?
Private Geary, right.
25 cents maybe.
25
I mean,
cents.
I don't really know, but
Fish a little bit more.
Okay.
I'd estimate that to be probable.
U.S. dollars now, what would something like that sell for?
At this point,
Well,
we're
you'd have to get me down on the ground and strangle me to take 150.
Okay.
You know,
Fair enough.
You know, reasonable. I mean, a day's wage,
Fair
day's
enough.
labor.
Fair enough.
You know,
fire.
It's a lot of work.
Okay, you lost your
Yeah, there's a lot of work
it
in
is
that.
a lot of work.